So now that you understand the wrong way to go about connecting to and working with databases, now let's take a look at the right way. And the right way is to take advantage of what we call PHP data objects, or as you will refer to it, PDO. Now this is simply an API for connecting to any number of databases. So I'll give you an example. If we come back to Sublime Text, consider that function we've reviewed in the last lesson, MySQL Connect. What is bad about this? Well, you may not know this, but MySQL is only one of many different databases. But the problem is that this function specifically depends on MySQL. But what if we want to use a different database entirely? Well, if that were the case and we needed to migrate to something different, we would essentially have to rewrite all of our database connection code. And that's not a good idea. But the great thing about PDO is it's database agnostic. It doesn't care what adapter you use. You simply specify it. In this case, we will stick with MySQL, and then it'll just work. And if we migrate to a different database at some point in the future, we only need to update our code in a couple areas to make all of that work, and that's fantastic. So what you're going to find is that PHP has 3 different adapters. First, we have the deprecated MySQL API, and that's what we looked at in the previous lesson. There is a newer form called MySQL Improved, or MySQLi, and that one is quite good too. And then finally, what we will go over in this lesson, and the one that is most often evangelized, is the PDO version. So let's figure out how we can use it. I'm going to create a new file, and once again, I'm going to call it functions.php. And within here, let's take a look at the MySQL Connect. We know from the previous lesson that we could connect to it by specifying the host, the username, and the password. So how would we change this to use PDO? Well, it's rather simple. We would say create our variable, our connection, and that'll be equal to a new instance of the PDO class. Now within here, we need to specify our connection string. So the first thing will be, what database are we using? Well, we're using MySQL. Next, we need to specify what our host is, and we can also pass in the database that we're connecting to. So in this case, the host is localhost, and the database name that we're going to grab from is still that practice database that we created earlier. Now don't let this confuse you, it's still very simple. First, we have the driver name, followed by a colon, and then we have our required details separated by a semicolon. So the host is localhost, the database name is practice. As the second and third parameters, we once again specify our username and password. So we'll say config db username and config db password. Now, if we're going to use that, once again, I want to make sure I include a config.php file, and I'll go ahead and create that right now. Config equals array, and db username is root. We did all of this in the last lesson, so I'm going to be fairly quick with this. That's plus, and let's just keep it like that for now. All right, so now we include that, and we can reference these like so. Next, I'm going to hide my sidebar just so I have a little bit more room. And now we have replicated our connection. Create a new instance, pass our information. That looks good to me. And again, what's nice about this approach is that if we decide to use something different, maybe SQLite, that's a different driver, we simply update it right here and we're good to go. We might have to change the connection string ever so slightly, but that's fine. That takes 5 seconds. And now we've migrated to using SQLite databases. But next, what if there is an error here? Well, in that case, why don't we wrap everything within a try-catch block? So we'll say try to do all of this, and if there is an error or exception, we'll say catch, and we'll listen for a PDO exception represented by this variable e. And if that's the case, let's just for now echo error, and then we'll add e.getMessage. So what this means is we're going to try to run this code. And if there is a PDO exception triggered, in that case, I just want to echo it out. All right, let's view this in the browser. If I run it, everything looks to be great because we're not getting anything on the screen. But watch what happens if maybe the database name we want to access doesn't exist. I'll just add some S's to represent that. Now if I come back, an exception was thrown, and now we echo out error as well as the exception. In this case, unknown database. So that can be very helpful. I'll remove that, come back, and now we're good to go. We have created a connection. Now there's one other thing that I'm going to add up here. I'm going to specify that we're going to set an attribute to our connection, and don't let this confuse you. PDO attribute error mode, and I'm going to set that to PDO error mode exception. Okay, this looks very confusing, and honestly, it should at this point. We haven't reviewed classes yet. We haven't reviewed what static properties and methods are. So just for now, accept that the default error mode for PDO is going to be something called error mode underscore silent. And what this means is, with that setting set left unchanged, we would have to manually fetch any errors. And we could do that by doing things like con error code. And you could do the same thing with error info, and that would return information related to the error that occurred. But what we want to do, at least for development, is make sure that we display any errors that occur in the process. So one more time, let's head back, reload the page. Everything looks good. So now we have successfully switched over to connecting to a database with PDO. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the first way to query a database, which is using the query method, which you need to be careful about. So stay tuned for the next lesson.